All right, welcome back, everyone, to a discussion on The Two Towers by J R R Tolkien. Jessica and I did a buddy read on the Fellowship of the Ring several months ago, and we had a conversation about it and the movie, and we did it again with The Two Towers. So we're going to talk about the book. We'll work the movie into it as well. Jessica, for those who haven't seen you before, why don't you tell us just briefly a little bit about what you like to read and what you do on your YouTube channel?
All right. So I'm a lifelong reader, much like you are, and I enjoy reading. Really, lately I've gotten into nonfiction. So, in childhood, it was all about like Laura Ingalls Wilder, Harry Potter, then a little bit later on, the Divergent series. So love youth books, young adult books. But then this year I'm more into reading biographies and some of this, like rereading these, I realized, okay, I do love the fantasy stuff. I love that. I do like Stephen King. I'll probably read more of him later in the year. And I also, my taste is just very like kind of all over the place, because now I'm also into some business books, learning about investing, which I would have hated years ago, but that's what I'm into right now. And so
Yeah, that's good. I like to read a lot of nonfiction too. I'm reading a book on free will now called Freedom Evolves. So I'd like to jump around. I'm curious, when you mentioned Stephen King, do you have a book in mind that you want to read by him, or what's going on with that?
So I thought about rereading Needful Things, but there's all these other books that I just haven't conquered yet. Like I need to read the Pet Sematary. I've putting that off because I'm like, I don't want to think about pets dying, but I watched that movie or parts of it years ago, and then I was freaked out and didn't finish it, and I fell asleep. And I'm like, let's redo that. So I'll read that again. Sometimes it's just a matter of whatever they have at the library, because otherwise I'm having to delve back into the internet and see, okay, which I have to read about. I'll go on Goodreads, read all these excerpts and see, okay, which one am I in the mood to read? And I know because of you and a couple others, I need to read the Dark Tower series, which I'll probably save for October. At least I might get the first one from the library and try it out before I commit to buying it. So that's where we are.
When it comes to the Dark Tower series, this story, The Lord of the Rings, has inspired so many stories that have, at least in part, copied what's going on. And it's a story worth copying, right? It's a story worth being retold, and it has been retold many times. And Stephen King's The Dark Tower is about a fellowship or a quartet in that world that have to make their way to a dark tower, which is what's going on in The Lord of the Rings. They're making their way to Mordor and the Dark Tower. So it's pretty interesting. But I've got a list of questions here to get us talking. So let's just start out here. I'm going to let you answer this first one. In The Two Towers, what did you think of the Ents?
So when I first tried to read this book when I was a lot younger, I was very confused by the Ents. But after reading this, and of course seeing them come to life in the movie, I really like them. It makes sense in a fantasy world, because we go into the forest, we think of animals, we think of witches in the woods, we think of these other beings. So when you think of the plants having life too, it's like, oh wow, why didn't I think of that? And I really enjoyed Treebeard being like this huge savior for Pippin and Merry, and it allowed little insignificant Pippin and Merry to really have a huge part in the war. Like it was because of them they started talking to Treebeard, and Treebeard saying, I'm the oldest thing here. In the book they described him as being a bit more human-like, but I think in the movie they made it like he's a talking tree with eyeballs. And I wanted him to be more tree-like, because I felt like I was picturing him from the movie, because once you've seen the movie, it's like it's hard to go back to your original vision. But as he walked and talked, sometimes they said the way he stood, he had feet and toes and everything, but I'm like, no, he's basically just a walking tree. That's how I want him to be. So, and it made sense how the other Ents, some of them were suspicious and like, no, we don't want to get involved, and they had personalities. So that was really cool. I liked them.
There are the Ents, which are these beings that are very tree-like And over time, apparently from what I read on Wikipedia, they become more tree-like with time. And then there's the opposite of that. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The Hurons, maybe. They're the tree-like beings that are with the Ents. And maybe in some sense they are an Ent, but they're like more animated and human-like than the other ones that are more like trees. I thought that was pretty good. I actually read up on Ents last night. I thought that it was good, and I don't know if there's some kind of philosophical point being made by Tolkien, and there probably is, where one of the real motivating factors for the Ents getting involved is that Saruman was cutting down trees. He was assaulting the grove of trees. And I don't know if there's a point being made there where if we keep abusing nature that it'll turn on us or something like that.
Wow.
I thought that I detected a lot of these like philosophical and psychological points go over my head when I'm reading novels. But I thought I sensed something there with he was abusing the trees and they ended up turning on him. I don't know. I don't know what the tie-in with that was, but I really liked. Yeah.
I mean, I could see how somebody might make it into that. Sometimes it's like, well, I can make it into this if I want to, but because in a certain way, it makes sense. We've got a comment that says, in the movies, they make the trees or the Ents more tree-like so that people can grasp the idea more visually and less intuitively. So it's, you have to make it more, what's the word, more commercial or more believable, because otherwise they were like this, not unearthly being, but it's hard to imagine what they are. But it was like the trees come to life.
Yeah.
And are they really trees? Well, we think that they are.
Yeah, in the movie, the thing that's in there, Treebeard was clearly distinguishable from an ordinary tree. Mm-hmm. I like how they did that in the movie. I think that one thing that surprised me about these movies was that the movie seemed to be just much more imaginative than even what was going through my mind as I was reading the novel. So I was really surprised by how well they did with building a sophisticated world. I was quite disgruntled by the turns from a plot, especially in the second movie, but I liked the trees. I really liked how the trees came through when they needed someone. And I thought it was extremely imaginative. And I like the idea of enchanted forests. You know, I just love any kind of fairy tale or novel that has to do with an enchanted forest, and trees that are alive are, plus there's some other tree stuff going on in the Fellowship of the Ring that could actually sing to the trees. Which was kind of weird, but I like everything that has to do with the trees in this novel. I thought it was one of the best parts was Treebeard, and I've got to get his Funko Pop. I'll let you answer that. I think there is a Treebeard one.
I've never seen a Treebeard one out there. Oh my goodness!
While I was reading, I got this. The Bilbo one is expensive. It's like $300 for a Bilbo. I guess it was a limited edition thing. But this is Frodo Baggins, and I want to get them all. You know, I really love this story, and I didn't expect that I would. When I set out to read this, I just wanted to read it so that I could say that I read it, so that I could understand it. I thought it was going to be a slow, boring read that I would struggle through, but I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was possibly the greatest novel I've ever read.
Oh,
not to say that it's necessarily my favorite novel, but like when I consider what this is as an artwork, it might be the best thing I've ever read. Mm-hmm. What did you think of the fact that Gandalf died from the battle with the Balrog, but was sent back to Middle-earth until his mission was complete? And I'll answer this one first. I didn't like that idea. You see, when I started reading The Fellowship of the Ring, I didn't realize that Gandalf was some kind of divine being, right? I just figured he was, I don't know what I thought he was, but I didn't think he was a god, right? And it seems like, I mean, how could the Fellowship fail if they had a god on their behalf? Sometimes I think that fantasy characters can become too powerful. And I like the fact that I guess that maybe in some sense Tolkien didn't overdo it, because Gandalf didn't really use his powers much, and he would struggle with things, and he couldn't even take the ring. He had to give it to someone else. But how could they lose if he could be killed and just come back? I don't know. I just didn't necessarily care too much for that idea. From what I understand, the other books that he's written, the Silmarillion, if I'm saying that right, and some of these other background books talk all about who Gandalf is and how the god system works and everything. But I don't know what I thought of that whole thing. What did you think about it?
Well, as you might remember from our previous interview, I was happy to have Gandalf back. But yet he wasn't exactly the same. You know, he was such a wealth of knowledge and power, but yet sort of ambiguous power. Like if he could do everything, none of this would have ever happened. There would be no fellowship. He would have used the ring or destroyed it all himself. So I think it gave them all this sense of like, oh no, like this journey really is serious. We've lost someone. And it gave Aragorn a chance to step up too, because he was also a very important character, but yet they were all sort of following Gandalf like, okay, well, he knows all the answers. He's traveled all over and talked to all these people and talked to other wizards. He kind of knows more about Sauron, so he'll help us lead the way. And then without him, it's kind of like losing your mentor. Well, what do I do now? I wasn't ready to lose him. Now we have to go on our own. And of course, you know, Boromir falls for temptation and wants to take the ring. Maybe that wouldn't have happened with Gandalf. So just something to consider too. And it was pretty scary when he came back. They're like, what is he? They didn't trust him. There's a lot of symbolism there that probably goes over my head too. Like, and I can respect that and say, well, he came back, he's all white. They definitely portrayed that well in the movie. There is something different, but it's kind of like he had to battle. It's like when we get to the spider part too. Like they had to battle the Balrog, which is like, to me, that's what the devil probably looks like. And then it was like his own personal battle. So yeah, I guess I can see why you feel sort of weird about it, or there's some confusion, but he comes back and he talks a lot. There's a lot of storytelling from his end, but I don't think it really ruined anything. It gave you more of a sense of mystery as a reader. Like, geez, what happened? That's too bad. We lost Gandalf. I see him. He was on the cover of the other book. Like, I thought he was. He's on the, okay, maybe it was The Hobbit he's on the cover of, but you know, I'm glad to have him back, but you know, I'm biased. Yeah, the newer ones. There he is. See, very important.
Yeah. I really like the actor that played him in the movie. You know, although I had never seen the movies before I read the book, pop culture influenced to some degree. I had an idea what I was getting into because of commercials and hearing people talk about it. And I already had this meme in my mind that he was Gandalf. So it was him that I was picturing as I was reading the book. You know, he's a really good character. And here's a question. If Gandalf is the wisest, most well-respected person, the most knowledgeable, and well, I don't know if discipline is the right word. If he's this great, a divine being, why is it that Frodo has to take the ring? It seemed as though Gandalf knew that the ring would be okay, at least temporarily, with Bilbo. And he knew that the ring would be safe, or at least he thought it would be safe with Frodo. It turns out if it wasn't for Sam that they wouldn't have got there. But why do you think that Gandalf didn't think that he had what it takes to take that ring? Because it would have been a lot easier for him to just take the ring to Mordor.
I don't think it's a matter of he didn't have what it takes. I think he had too much. He was still considered a mortal, at least I believe so. So he knows that, yes, he's more powerful than most living beings in Middle Earth, and yes, he's going to outlive a lot. You know, a lot of them live a long time, but yet he said this ring would corrupt me. Like Bilbo or Frodo's like, no, take it. And he's like, gets pretty worked up about the idea of himself taking it. He's like, oh no, don't. It wasn't like he didn't. I think he said like he would have liked it too much, or he would have ended up using it for a power like no person should wield that much power over others. He thinks it would have corrupted him just like Saruman. And I know we're not there talking about him yet, but he would have eventually been corrupted, and he just didn't trust that. I guess he also just didn't see himself as a person who deserved the ring, or it's like this ring has caused so much strife. No one should have it. Not a powerful wizard, not an insignificant creature from another part of Middle Earth, and none of that.
That's a great point about Saruman, because Saruman was the leader of I think it was the White Council. If that's the Council of Wizards is the White Council, that's actually the same term that Jim Dresden uses in the Dresden Files. The Wizard Council is the White Council. So that's an example of someone borrowing directly from the Lord of the Rings. But I guess Sauron would have actually been even wiser than Gandalf if he was at the head of the White Council.
He was a higher ranking.
Right, and presumably, yeah, he was higher ranking, but that might reflect that he was a more experienced wizard. Maybe he was a little older or something. But maybe that was an example for Gandalf. He saw what happened to the greatest of the wizards, and he didn't even have the ring. He was being influenced by the ring from afar. So maybe he worked as an example, and Gandalf deeply considered what happened to him.
Yeah,
that's a good point. And I'm sure there are philosophical points that I didn't catch with
someone
that.
out there's like probably dying to answer, but
let us know if you have any topics in the comments, guys. We'll get to every comment. It seems like novel writers, for some reason, novel writers seem to be particularly adept at understanding psychology and motive and human nature. Dostoevsky and Tolkien's good too. I actually bought a book called Philosophy and the Lord of the Rings, one book to rule them all. I'm going to read it soon, but because I missed so much in this, I wanted to get an in-depth take, and I'm going to do a video on that when I read that book. But yeah, Gandalf's a great character and probably the greatest of the characters. I'm interested in reading some of the background books. Have you ever read any of the other ones that go into explaining everything that happened in the Lord of the Rings?
Now I'm gonna feel bad. No, I haven't. I'm just a regular old Lord of the Rings reader, because I don't know, this is what people talked about. So when you have a famous series, you want to read them. At least that's right. How I felt. I was introduced to the books before I'd ever heard of them, and my dad got these and said, I guess he knew about them from his childhood days. I don't know if he'd read them all or not. And so I'm like, okay, I'll read them. But I think there's a lot of impatience reading this type of novel. I don't think I could read these books all the time. I want to read something that's faster paced. There's a lot of descriptions. Yeah. So, but his style, you do have to appreciate it, much like if you're in a English literature class and you're having to read something that's like, why is there so much detail? What's going on? But then you think, actually, this type of this language, these sentences it does make you better. I think it makes you a better writer if you challenge yourself by reading these books, because you can understand mostly what's going on, but yet there's a little bit of just things that people don't speak like this, think like this, or write like this anymore. At least none that I've seen.
Yeah, it really is a masterpiece. And I actually went ahead and I finished the final installment, The Return of the King. And I might read more on this, get into some of his other books. I am curious about Gandalf and who he is and where he came from and who it was that was guiding him, because Gandalf wasn't God, right? So I am kind of curious, but I'll probably take a little break before I read another one, because it was a long story, even though it was a great story.
We do have a comment. Yeah. Fit to be read. I hope I said that right. In the movie, they have ghost warriors that just obliterate all the bad guys. Any reason they didn't just get that spirit army from day one? So they talked about, here and there in the books, they talked about men from the past, other groups, and of course the people who were around Sauron at first, like when he was conquered, and then that the fingers cut off with the ring. But then it's kind of like we didn't know about Fangorn Forest. Not really, did we? Until the second book. There's a lot of mystery. Like, how come no one's talked about the Balrog before? That was a pretty big deal. How come no one talked about Shelob the spider until we got right up on her? So yeah, that is a really cool point. It's like there's a lot to this Middle Earth that the Fellowship, our little buddies here, don't talk about until it matters. It's like until you get right up into that point. But same idea though about why didn't Gandalf just, hop up on the eagle, fly to Mordor, and drop the ring down there? Well, why not? There's probably lots of good explanations for it, but other than the dismissive comment of, well, then there would be no story. Yeah. Or it's like probably worth looking into. Why do you think? Do you remember that part?
What specifically are you asking me?
Thanks, Fit to be read. So why I guess what was kind of
about
going back to the first book.
Yeah.
He's saying, you know, why do they go through all this trouble to like have these two little people plus Gollum sneak into Mordor to destroy the ring when there were other ways to conquer these people? I guess, you know, why did the ring have to be taken and destroyed this way? Why couldn't they just get all these armies together to charge Sauron and Saruman? I guess, what is your response to that? Why did it have to be like this?
Well, I think the comment that there wouldn't be a story is a dismissive one, but it is a legitimate one. You know, the short story about Gandalf flying the ring to Mordor might have been a good short story, but it wouldn't have made for an epic novel. Plus, Gandalf apparently couldn't handle the ring. He knew that something would happen to him if he took that ring. So, I mean, that could be one answer to why he didn't do it himself. But when it comes to the armies,
we'll talk about more of it later. And like in the third book too, but he's just wondering. He's remembering something from, you know, a pretty big deal especially near the end of the movie, how they portray it in the third installment.
When it comes to Gandalf, you know, perhaps a proper study could be done, and I'm sure they have. But for whatever reason, he wasn't able to take that ring to Mordor himself. They needed Frodo Baggins to do it. Of all the people in Middle Earth, they needed Frodo Baggins. But I don't know. I don't have a good answer. It does seem to me that with Gandalf being a divine being, or the spirit army would have been, you know, usable. But I don't know. It's all speculation. When we're talking about the spirit army, because I'm having a little trouble because I read on with the Return of the King. The spirit army is where they were going through the Fangorn forest and the beings that were in there joined them for the fight on the other side. Is that what that's about, or am I missing something here?
He's thinking about it. I know we got to get to Sam and Frodo, plus talking about Gollum or Slinker and Stinker.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move to Gollum. Gollum apparently had two different personalities, and Sam catches this. I'm assuming that, I guess, the ring put so much pressure on his mental state that it separated him into some kind of split personality. That was about what I could make out of that. Why does Gollum have both the Slinker and Stinker personality, and what does all of that mean?
I think he represents maybe the average living being who had a choice. Well, I'm going to take the selfish evil route. You know, it's all about good and evil. So he was once this, he wasn't a hobbit, but he was this like similar being to a hobbit. So not a man, but something
He actually was a hobbit. He was a different kind of hobbit. Different.
So, right. Okay, if you want to call him that, he was a normal, healthy being. And then once he found the ring, and he was tempted to take it from his friend who had found it first, or he wanted it. And so when he murdered. So I feel like that sort of reflects back to the story in the Bible where the first murder was one brother was jealous of another. So the first murder was committed. So of course, and that meant, well, he was sort of tainted forever. Like he had a dark side, but you know, even people who do these things can repent. Well, instead, it's kind of like people who store up a bunch of treasures and such. You're not really going to do anything with it. If we have a lot of treasures, we have a lot of something precious and valuable. What are you really, it means nothing if you don't do something significant with it or something for others. So he was so obsessed with the ring that he hid down in his cave and just would talk to it like it was a person. Oh, my precious, and just fawning over it night and day. Well, it did nothing but hurt his mental state, because he thought he was happy, but he was just wasted away into this nothing like creature. So I think when he found Frodo and Sam, it was sort of reminded of his old ways. Like, oh yeah, I used to be this living creature who was a part of a social circle. Like I lived in a community. And so maybe he's not pure evil yet, but it's kind of like a person who's like a criminal who's done a lot of bad things. It's like, there's an opportunity there for them to repent, like turn from their ways. And he could have, I don't know how Gollum would have ever torn himself away from wanting the ring, maybe with counsel from Gandalf, or like isolating himself from the ring for years. But as long as the ring was around and he could feel the power, I think he was too tempted. So I think there's like a part of him that wanted to be good, like, well, we want to be in favor of somebody. We like Frodo. He's treating us nicely. No one's ever been nice to him. I don't think Bilbo was, or Bilbo eventually had to get away from him, so he didn't respect Gollum and nobody else. And he was tortured by elves to get information. He didn't trust anybody. So Frodo was maybe the only person giving him hope, like maybe it's worth it to try to be good. But then he was too overtaken, and by that point, like he was led to go back to Mordor anyway. So he was probably beyond hope. But I think it's like the angel on the shoulder and the devil on the other, like which choice do I make? That's how I saw it.
It makes me wonder about Sauron, because it just occurred to me that Sauron, because I'm going to go forward to the third book here, where we don't get to actually meet Sauron. He's never revealed. So I wonder if Sauron might be something like Gollum, just desperate for that ring. Every purpose and intent is to get that ring, because we don't get to see him. I wonder if he's some kind of deranged maniac because of what the ring did to him. And I'm sure there's an answer. I could probably get it if I read the background books. But Gollum was very deeply close to destroyed by that ring. One moment.
Yep.
What kind of hobbit was Gollum?
Store hobbit.
He was called a store hobbit, which was
the hobbit of the river
the hobbits of the river folk. So presumably he was a little man-looking creature, and it really messed his ass up. I thought that they did well with him in the movie versions. That was like spot on with, with how
probably
he was.
A favorite character. He could be everything. He could be sweet, funny. He could be cute. And then he could be totally creepy and evil. He could pull it off because of his look. And there's so much material on him to work with. Like, I think... And then if you're Sam or Frodo, you don't want him following you from a mile or two away. I mean, when they would say, like, you could see his eyes. I thought I saw something following us. Glowing eyes. That would scare anyone. And then once you have him, you almost like want your enemy close so you can see him.
I'd like a backstory. Maybe there is one. I don't know what's in that collection, but I would be curious to read on Gollum and who he was and what his life was like. How did he come across the ring? Was it he found it in a river or something like that?
He and a friend were on a little boat in a river or a brook or a stream, something with a little canoe. And let's see, I think the friend fell into the water. They were fishing because Gollum always loved fish. That was like part of his diet.
Yeah.
And let's see, one of them found it. I think the friend found it. He said, "Hey, look at this." And the friend was probably more like, "Oh, this is interesting." And then Gollum, he was called Smeagol back then, saw it and was just transfixed by it. And he was like, "Let me see it." And there was that back and forth. "No, it's mine. No, mine. No, mine." And then he ended up killing the friend.
That's right.
And he felt a little bad, but he's like, "Well, at least I have it now." And then he was excommunicated from his, I don't know if he chose to run off or if they saw what he did and he had to isolate himself because he was a killer. And they're like, "We don't want you, get out of here." And so he had to just make it on his own.
That really shows the power of that ring, because presumably Gollum was just a normal man that liked to fish and whatever thing. Maybe he was somewhere in the middle of the hierarchy of his community. And within moments of finding that ring, he was a murderer already.
Yeah, so he was more of his soul was weaker. He was more prone to be tricked by it, whereas Frodo's not. They're not like, "Well, I'm not going to use it," or "I don't trust it," or "I'm wise to it." Maybe had he known it was bad, he would have held back a bit. Who knows?
What kind of hobbit was Frodo Baggins?
Fallowhides.
A fallow
According to
hide.
the
Oh,
one
hi.
wiki,
You'll probably hear that in your philosophy book, one or the other. Maybe somebody listening knows. They know exactly all this. More
Oh,
information.
I'm sure. There are people that probably could basically have a doctorate degree on knowing everything that has to do with this book. So let's make one final point on Gollum then. Gollum is presumably written into the story for an important reason. I'm curious what you think about the purposes, because presumably Frodo and Sam could take that ring on their own. And even at some point, Gandalf says, I think when they're in the mines of Moria, he says, he kind of elaborates on Gollum. He says, perhaps Gollum even has a hand to play in things yet to come, or whatever. I'm just paraphrasing there, but paraphrasing. What do you think the purpose is of Gollum?
Well, I think, first of all, he creates tension because you're always a little bit worried. You're fascinated by him, and then you're worried that he's going to take the ring, kill our heroes, and, go back to his cave and disappoint everybody by, keeping the ring to himself, which you kind of know that's not going to happen. But he also serves as a representation of what greed and evil can do to a living being. So it's eating them up. Everybody else thinks they want it, but Gollum's the only person who, other than Bilbo, was around it for so long that it consumed him. Bilbo was of a stronger moral character, so he had it around and he'd use it for play, but that was before Sauron and Saruman had decided to come back into power. So Gollum had it when it was more of a benign item. And he just, but he was more, it did have a power over him. Just Bilbo was stronger and wiser, and he was a bit more of a loving character, even though he was sort of sarcastic with his family members. It didn't hurt him. But over time, even Gandalf saw, you know what, Bilbo, I see you're mighty attached to this ring. What's going on? When he kind of showed like, oh, geez, I really would like to have that thing, but okay, I know it should be destroyed. Okay, Gollum would have never wanted it destroyed. I think he wanted it, but he didn't have the capacity to be a leader or even an evil ruler. He didn't know how. He was just like a very low level, low bottom of the totem pole. Like certain people who win the lottery and they don't know how to handle it. So they squander their money, like they spend it selfishly, they squander it, and then they're kind of back to where they started. So I think you kind of saw, you know what, power maybe isn't so great, or power can be used in such a wrong way. Like it can't, don't think that it's going to solve problems. In fact, it's going to create a lot more.
It's a testament to the difference in character between Bilbo and Gollum. If you were to do like a before and after picture of both of those, it turned one into a monster, and the other one was scarred by it to some degree as well. And even to jump forward to the third book, after the ring is destroyed, there's some more that happens after that, and Frodo lives on and everything, but he has like nightmares and shit even after it. Even him with his moral exemplary ways was scarred by the ring, but not nearly as bad as what happened to Gollum. What did you think about the way that the book was split up? Like the first part of the Two Towers is with one part of the Fellowship, and the other part is with Aragorn and Merry and Pippin and them. Did you think that worked for the storyline, or would you have rather seen it woven together more closely?
I think that books today are more likely to jump around, or we see it from different character perspectives. Like we could have seen a first person view from Sam, and then we go to Pippin's telling his story, and then maybe even Treebeard. That could have done. People would like that maybe they could write a version, the story somewhere like that. But because of how descriptive it is, I think it's fine to keep it together. There were moments when I'm like, oh, where are they? Like, I want to get to, where the ring actually is, or I wanted to know, okay, at what point in their journey did the actual battle happen? When did that happen? Because it was exciting when they were trying to find Pippin and Merry, they're tracking them. That was really neat. He left the clue with the little leaf, but then I guess it keeps it all together. That it helps you remember each part a bit more, but yet you're a little more removed from it. Yeah, it's fun. Like Game of Thrones books, you're jumping around all the time, and if you're not really a great reader, or if you're reading with the TV on or something, you're going to be more distracted. So you're like, wait, hold on, and you're having to flip back. Well, with the book, basically like this, you're never flipping back. You don't need that. So it's fine. It's fine. I think it works for this book. It doesn't bother me. I'd forgotten I did that though.
Yeah, maybe he did it to, obviously did it to get us to specifically focus on one group rather than the other. But I thought it was pretty interesting. After Gandalf is killed by that thing, Aragorn takes over. And I thought that it was particularly interesting. And I don't know what exactly the point was, but like in the Fellowship of the Ring, Aragorn is a king to be, right, of the highest stature, other than maybe someone like Gandalf of the White Council. And he is brought all the way down to the level of like the beggars and the thieves and the bar with the drunkards and whatnot. That's where he comes into the story. He's in a bar watching what's going on as he's trying to work the deal with that ring on behalf of Gandalf and everything like that. But I thought there must be some kind of point about human nature where the king was brought down to the very bottom to try to make things right. What did you think about Aragorn's character? I'm curious. I wasn't sure if I liked his character or not, and I did come to like his character. And there's also something going on with him where apparently he is some kind of low-level wizard or something where he can heal. It's not explicitly stated that he has the magical powers to heal people, but it is implicitly stated. I'm a little off with the questions, but I'm curious what you thought about the king and his role in the Two Towers.
When you look at the movie, you see him as this really pretty likable, complex character, but I think in the book, I almost don't notice him as much. I think if I'd only read the books and I didn't know there was anything else, I would see he's just sort of another one of the guys there. Like I trusted him and I liked him, but when I'm reading about the Fellowship, I'm looking more at Gimli and Legolas and their dynamic of, well, I don't know about dwarves. Well, I don't know about elves. That there's all that. Aragorn is the human, so you're like, well, where's he really from? And at the beginning we didn't trust him, or like, who's this weird guy with the cloak on, or we don't know who he is. But it's just, he's another mystery that I don't think I would have been as interested had I known about him. But there's more. I think there's more to his story. Like he was I guess he was the descendant. He was supposed to be king, but yet at first he didn't seem very kingly. But then I think what does he do? At a certain point, he does something and they listen to him, or this is after Gandalf has died. Aragorn makes a stand, and the book says something like, never before had they seen him be so kingly, or so he wasn't Strider anymore. He was, he's actually quite full of authority, and look at his posture, look at his very demeanor itself has changed. So then okay, he becomes trustworthy and brave in the sense that he knows about, let's go see the Riders of Rohan, and it's kind of funny to hear them talk. They're all like polite, but yet everyone's very firm and no one trusts each other. Like, who are these travelers? So I probably should like him more than I do. I don't dislike him, but there's just other characters who stand out more to me because I feel like we see more of their personality.
Yeah, that is true. Even when he's introduced in the tavern there, he's like sitting in the shadows, and you don't get a real good description on him. He's kind of elusive throughout the book until the end when he comes in and everything. But perhaps the rest of the Fellowship didn't see his authority because Gandalf was there, and he was the authority when he was around anyone except for maybe Sauron in the beginning, when Sauron was his direct leader or whatever.
Also in Rivendell, there's Rivendell too, I think. What is his name? The leader of Rivendell. But yeah, normally
Elf?
Gandalf knows them much. What is his name?
Let's
I think
look
it's
it up.
the little
Who
elf.
is the leader of Rivendell?
According to Tolkien
Elrond.
Gateway, Elrond
Yeah,
was the
Elrond.
Is that
half-brother
right?
son of Eärendil
That's
and
right.
Elrond.
Yeah, the Lord of Rivendell. Yeah.
You get a lot of similar names going on with Tolkien
Yes.
too.
I almost thought that maybe because Saruman and Sauron were both part of this evil scheme, maybe he intentionally made their names very similar, because that's a problem with their names. They're very, very similar.
Yeah.
But my last point on Aragorn is that after Gandalf died, the Fellowship was apparently in peril. The leader was gone. They were doing what Mithrandir told them to do. And I guess they were fortunate at that point that the king was there with them, because it was him that set the directive after Gandalf died. So they needed his direction when Gandalf was gone. So I just thought I would make that point.
Mm.
What did you think of? Well, let's briefly talk about Wormtongue. I thought that he was a very interesting character.
Oh, yeah.
And it made me think of just real human people, the way they try to manipulate one another and dominate one another and deceive one another. What did you think of Wormtongue's character?
He made me think of Jafar, how there's the actual king and the evil advisor or whatever he was like literally putting weird evil thoughts into his head and sickening him. In the movie, he looks terrible. You get there, you're like, who's this weird guy and what's wrong with this king? Guess he looks like he has leprosy and worse, you know? So the Wormtongue is just like one of those weaker servants. Like he could have been like a Gollum, where Saruman, he decided, well, I want to serve Saruman instead. So he knows Saruman wants Gondor. He wants that area. And so all it was, I'm going to promise this guy, this Wormtongue, riches. And he thought he could get away with it. You know, it was just a choice between good and evil. And, you know, when he was discovered, they didn't kill him off. They let him ride off. They're like, let's give him a choice, let him ride off. All he did was ride off to Saruman, and then he was stuck there with them in the tower. You know, he's pretty vile, but just not as... There was more to him. I think I've forgotten some because he's right there in the middle of that story. What did you think?
Yeah. I loved his character. I thought that it was really interesting how his role came into play, because he was an extension of Saruman, and by that logic, an extension of Sauron as he was manipulating the king. He messed the king all up, did that Wormtongue. The king was basically like a completely invalid under his influence, which was really the influence of Saruman. But I thought that was really good. I really like the final say with Wormtongue and the return of the king. I think that works out really interestingly. But I liked his character a lot. I thought he was one of the best ones. They should do a Funko Pop on him. I
just liked when they said, Gandalf is like, hold your tongue, or what he says, like, you speak with a forked tongue, and he yells at him, and because it's a little bit surprising that no one else noticed, or it's like they couldn't get rid of him until Gandalf and everybody showed up. They're like, what's really going on here? It was like pest control. I'm gonna go in, get rid of this, and I keep wanting to call him Wormtail from Harry Potter. No.
Is there a character in Harry Potter that plays the role that Wormtongue plays?
There's a character, you need to know this, but same. I guess when we think of worms, we have if there's a negative connotation. Anyone who's worm-like can be deceived and turned over, used as a pawn in an evil scheme. So there's Wormtail. Long story short, he was once friends. He was a Gryffindor. He was once friends with Harry's dad, and then he ended up basically leading Voldemort to him, so that Harry's parents died because of Wormtail. So poor worms, they get a bad rap because we call them in literature. We liken anything as a worm is bad or deceitful or needs to be removed. Yeah,
in the Harry Potter series, I'm only through book 3 now. I'm really enjoying it. I got to read book 4 soon. It's been a while since I finished the 3rd one, but it's interesting where you see these characters like Wormtongue or Wormtail, And they're kind of like just an archetypical part of so many different stories. You know, you pick up just a random novel and you're going to see these kind of certain set characters that play these very specific roles. But I thought Wormtongue was good. And Wormtongue was particularly powerful and dangerous because the people around knew that there were powerful people that did not want him there, right? Like the king's children and whatever. But he was particularly powerful because he had the approval of Sauron, the leader of the White Council, and the approval of the king that he was manipulating. So he was like extremely high up in the hierarchy. And that was one reason they had such a hard time dealing with him.
I guess he just couldn't be thrown out. Like the Rohan riders, they didn't like him at all. He jailed them or something. Like people knew, but they just couldn't get rid of him. So, do people have questions? I only see comments when they've come through. I can't tell like how many are watching or not.
No, it's still at where it was at. But let's do one more, and then we'll speculate generally for a few minutes, and then we'll call it done. What did you think of Shelob the spider? I really liked this part because I liked Shelob because like she wasn't even subject to Sauron. She was like not even part of that hierarchy with him at the very top there in Mordor. Like she was her own boss, so to speak. And I liked her a lot. A big evil spider. I thought it just worked. It almost reminded me of Tom Bombadil in the way that something just kind of really unusual was inserted into the plot that I didn't expect. But I liked Shelob's character quite a bit. And I thought that it was a really brilliant thing to put her right on the edge, right to the entrance of Mordor as this horrible creature. What did you think of her?
It was like, what? More danger? Come on. Like I just try to put myself with Sam and Frodo and think, could I have done what they did with all of this stuff? But they had just what they needed. It gives Sam a chance to actually be a hero when beforehand he was just more of like a support system. So him actually fending off the spider, like using the sword, you forget about the swords that they were given sometimes, and the light that scared it off because it's like evil is afraid of light's going to go away. But I think Sauron knew about Shelob. I think they talk about her. Actually, I really enjoyed hearing the orc conversation about her. Of course, we hate the orcs, but I also they're kind of funny sometimes. Just even they're like, they're sort of driven by fear. So they've got Sauron over here. They've got this spider, and it's like everyone knows about Gollum. The spider knows, and he's like, I'm gonna lead them to her. And it's just this. It reminds me of the episode in The Mandalorian, but we won't go there right now. But just like all that, if you've seen it, there's all these ice spiders on planet, and then there's one big mama spider, and they're all just despicable and gross. But I don't know. She was just in her own. I think she'd lived forever, and even in the end, they weren't sure if she was dead. They were like, the book says something like, "In this tale, we will not tell if Sam's sword actually totally destroyed her, or if she was just super injured and had to recoup for a long time." And I liked that it made us think, oh gosh, is Frodo dead? Never mind. No, he isn't. It just gave Sam like a chance to be a hero and like a major heart attack too.
What does it mean? Because I presume because Frodo is selected specifically by Mithrandir to take that ring. And Bilbo knows that Frodo should have it. Like the council recognizes it. Everyone with any sense recognizes that he's the one that needs to take that ring. But I wonder if Sam wouldn't have been just as good or even better a choice to take the ring, because there are times when it seems like Frodo's succumbing to the ring and Sam has to work him through that problem. So I wonder what would have happened if Sam would have taken the ring with Frodo accompanying him along the way, if he would have been subjected to the power of the ring faster than Frodo was, or what would have happened if Sam would have taken it?
Well, it made sense that a Baggins would take it. They were more adventurous, or at least because of Bilbo's adventures, Frodo was always interested in going somewhere else. Sam wasn't. Sam was just led by his friendship. So Frodo was the one, but I think it was he needed to have someone like Sam, but I don't think anyone really took Sam seriously for a long time. Gandalf did. And Sam was spying on their conversation, and that's why he was involved in the first place, because he was listening in, and he said, Samwise, what have you heard? And Sam's like, oh, just something about a ring and power, or he basically heard the whole thing. So he was just along for the ride by happenstance, and then everyone really grows to like him. He comes into his own, because he was more of like a subservient character who probably would have never left the Shire, but he was given an opportunity to, he grew as a character, and not even Gandalf really thought that would happen. He just realized, yeah, Frodo, you do need some loyal accomplices or comrades.
Yeah, and I don't think Tolkien actually started that whole archetypical fellowship. I know that, I've never read like the Odyssey or anything like that, but I know that that's kind of like a similar story structure where there's this big journey that happens to do whatever. But when it comes to Sam, he actually puts the ring on at least once. He puts the ring on, and he experiences the ring being on, and he takes the ring off, and he seems to be unaffected by the power of the ring. But it's hard to compare him to Frodo, because Frodo carried the ring for quite some time, and presumably the longer you look what happened to Gollum when he carried it for such a long period of time. It completely wrecked him. And even Bilbo, one of the greatest of all people, was negatively influenced. I like how in the movie, maybe it was the first movie, but Bilbo wants the ring back, and he turns into like a monster for a second.
His face changes, like total greed comes out, and it's scary. His teeth change. Yeah, they say that in the book, but in the movie they played it up, made it more scary. But I did love that at the end where Sam puts on. I love that he thought Frodo was dead. He appeared to not be breathing or anything. He was wrapped up in all that spider goo, so that she'd come back later and eat him. So he's like, well, I guess I do have to take the ring with me. So he takes it from Frodo, which was so smart, because had he not done that, what would have happened? The orcs came along and collected Frodo and said, oh, who's this? It's not even a man. What's this small thing? Well, he's still alive. I guess Shelob was going to eat him and he didn't. Well, let's take him inside. And then Sam's like, they would have seen the ring and something would have happened. I'm not sure what, but it would have gone right then and there, probably to Sauron.
One of those orcs would have succumbed to the power of the ring probably immediately.
Ugh, a big battle.
One point on Shelob was that Sauron actually recognized her and valued her presence and would actually send orcs. One of the worst probably the worst orc detail you could have as an orc worker was to work that mine that she was in. But yeah, in conclusion on Sam, is Sam a more pure person, less likely to be influenced by the ring than Frodo is?
I don't know. I've never thought about it before. Probably your hardest question. Is he more? He certainly, I actually wrote down a couple things. Like I said, he seemed to be, the way they have him speak, he's like of maybe lower education. Because in their world, even in their world in the Shire, he was a gardener. That meant he didn't need reading and books. Now, he picked up on it because he was close to Bilbo and his family, but he would talk about his dad or grandfather, the gaffer, like they were kind of like salt of the earth people. They weren't like innovative and wanting to be out and about learning things, moving to cities and all that. And so I think he was more of like, he had less of a filter. So Sam will say some things that everyone's thinking like, Frodo, how can you trust that nasty Gollum? Like he would call him names. And although Sam would support Frodo was like, why do you do that? Why do you treat him? Why do you talk down on him and call him names? And it's kind of like, well, we're all thinking it. Like, listen, you need to be, he was more like street smart in the way, like, even though he had never been anywhere outside the Shire, he was more like, you need to think about these things. Like he was more pessimistic, more cynical. And Frodo was just kind of well, I've been given a mission. I must do it, but I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can go on. There was a lot of that. Where Sam was a bit more colorful, where he played hero, he played devoted friend, and what else was he? That's what I think. I think Sam's more of like the everyman, where Frodo's sort of like this destined person that he was sort of born to help get rid of the ring.
Sam has a certain like naivety to him, where he almost has like this innocence that's upon him, and it seems like Frodo is more aware of potential dangers in the world. I don't know, maybe that's not right, because it seemed like Sam recognized the danger from Gollum better than Frodo did. So Sam is a mystery to me, and I just wonder how things would have turned out had Sam been the one elected to take that ring. He actually had the ring. He was the ring bearer for a very brief period of time, and I'm sure the author made him the ring bearer for whatever reason, but he was the ring bearer for a short period of time.
Yeah,
and
he helped carry that burden, and it affected their personality. I need to go back and see that part of the movie just to kind of see, because I felt like in the movies they did more of a trade-off, like, okay, let's agree that I can see how this ring's affecting you. It's literally become a weight. Like he could feel the weight of it, even though it was this size. So they said, let's trade off. And then sometimes like Frodo was like, well, you just want it for yourself. Like, no, that's not it. And you reacting like that proves that this thing has had a negative effect on you. Yeah.
The ring was so heavy that it was like he was like a hunchback by the time he got to the damn thing, because it was weighing him down. But yeah, I like Sam a lot, and I'm sure that when I go into that philosophy in the Lord of the Rings book, that they'll talk about Sam, and I'm sure I'll have a better understanding of this book when I complete that. But I really like Sam Gamgee. I've got to get his Funko Pop so I can put it next to this one here.
Yes, definitely. Sam's a favorite for sure.
Yeah, this is an incredible story. I appreciate you coming on and talking with me about it. If in the future you decide that you want to take that last step and go through the Return of the King, and you want to come on and talk about that one, we can get into how the novel ends. But I like the Two Towers.
I'll think about it.
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to, that's fine as well. I know that you already know how it ends and everything. One of the reasons I think I was so enthusiastic about reading this is because I really didn't know what to expect from the story. I only just had this loose idea that there was a journey, and I assume Frodo was successful putting the ring in Mordor and everything. So it was all new to me, and I really enjoyed it. Have you read The Hobbit?
Yes, actually, I remember reading that, and when I was younger, I liked it better. But then I think I watched the first movie years later, years after reading the book, which means a lot of the time you've forgotten some things in the book, so you watch the movie. But then they made it into 3 movies, which everybody just, they talk about, like, I can't believe they did that. And, I haven't actually seen the second and third. I just never did. So I loved The Hobbit, and that's why I guess that's why I feel like I understand Gollum a bit more, because you see more of his origin. Like, at least, you're gonna go back and see more about him.
Yes,
and
that's what I want to do.
Where he lived in that cave by himself, talking to the ring out loud. That's how Bilbo. Spoiler, but Bilbo finds him in a cave.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I won't give any more away, but there's, of course, plenty more to that.
Yeah, I do want to read The Hobbit. I probably won't do it in the very near future, but I do want to read that. This is such a great story. So you haven't seen the second movie then?
Of The Hobbit. I've seen the Two Towers. But
Okay. So before we summarize our thoughts here, let's talk just briefly about the second movie, because I thought that the first movie was closely... I only picked up on a few things that were off with that. Of course, Tom Bombadil didn't make the first movie. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like it was okay. I said, okay, it wasn't too bad, especially into comparison to some other things like the Dark Tower movie. Then the second movie, The Two Towers, I don't know how long it's been since you've seen it, but I noticed more changes going on. They started changing the damn story in that second movie. For example, at the Battle at Isengard, if you read the book, you realize that the Ents actually attack that place, and they come to the rescue However, the Ents do not attack in the movie. It's actually the elves that come forward to help with the fight at Isengard. And I just thought that was so unnecessary. And in the movie, there's this big like drainage tunnel that they realize they can get through to attack Isengard. There was nothing like that in the book. They actually had to put up ladders and scale the dam. So it was like just a lot was going on that was changed. And the movie was great in a sense, the way they made it come to life. But I felt that it was just veering too far away from the original script. And I was not as big a fan of it as I was the first one. What did you think?
Well, I know I really loved the movie because of the battle scene, because of that feeling you get when all the orcs they're showing up, there they are in the dark and the rain, and then you realize, wait a minute, I think we're outnumbered here big time, because they just kept coming. You know, and then they had the trolls and those rock flinging devices, and then you're like, we have this, you know, hard scrabble group here. We have our vulnerable, like the women and children. We have a few elves. We have whatever men we could get, and that's it. Well, if it weren't for the allies coming in, they probably would have lost that. And there were plenty of arrows and all of that. But in the book, it felt like, you know, with those scenes, you do enjoy that part of the movie. I enjoy that better than reading about action is tough, because there's a lot of, I felt like the battle kept going and then it kept changing. But in the movie, it's like, here's this. Okay, here come the trees. Okay, there's Gandalf. Oh, he brought people after all. Look, there he is. He's been gone again. Now he's back. Yeah. And it felt very justified. So in the book, I was remembering that scene from the movie, thinking, when are they going to get to the part? And then of course there's Isengard, and you love the part where he's up there in that tower, like his nasty nails are clutching the sides. And he's like, what's going on down there? Oh no. And his weird beard's like, his hair is flying everywhere. But didn't the battle, the whole movie, it switched. The movie did what the book didn't. So you're kind of seeing, okay, here's Sam and Frodo. Okay, this is the part with the Riders of Rohan, which I really like that part. And then the battle is more of a culminating experience at the end, that they're like, it's like more of the climactic point. In this book,
yes,
they do it all. There's the battle. And then it's like a whole nother book of, by the way, guys, here's what's actually happening on the other side of things, where sometimes you want to know, like, where are they at a certain point? Like, I don't know. I think I really enjoyed that movie, probably maybe more than the first one, but it's just, I don't like comparing them either. You know, you enjoy parts of the first one and you enjoy certain parts of the second one more than the first, but overall they're both just incredible to read and to watch.
I know that the second movie doesn't end where the second book ends. I'm curious about the third one. I've got to watch that soon. Maybe I'll do it this weekend. Because I can't remember where it ends up, because I'm lost now, because I read the third installment. So I can't remember exactly where the break is. But I think at the end of the Two Towers novel, Shelob is there at the end of the second one. But in the movie, they don't go that far. So the spider doesn't make it in until the third movie. But I'm not sure. I'm confused with where everything stops and starts. But thanks for joining me. Let's summarize our thoughts on this novel. And I'll give you the final word. So I'll start here. You know, I picked this book up and I was skeptical about if I was even going to make it through it. And that was why I asked you to do a buddy read with me on the first one, because I felt that would hold me accountable and I would be forced to finish it, even if I wasn't enjoying it, for the sake of the conversation at the end. But surprisingly, I really enjoyed this book. You know, one of the common criticisms on this is people say that it's a little slow, but I felt that it actually was like not slow for me. I mean, it wasn't the fastest paced novel ever, but I thought that it was a pretty good book overall. And I enjoyed every bit of this novel. I thought that it was extraordinary. You know, a lot of people say the Two Towers is their favorite part of the story, how it begins to develop with the king and everything, and the Ents. I thought that it was great. I thought that it was certainly arguably the greatest novel ever written. It's certainly one of the best that I've personally ever read, just my own subjective taste. I thought it was really good, but I give it my maximum recommendation. What did you think?
I'd say I still find it challenging to read just because it's not something you can just pick up and casually, like you have to really absorb yourself in this world because it's an overwhelming place, this Middle Earth. You keep finding out about things, and maybe that's just that I'm not the biggest fantasy person. So whenever I see something, I'm like, oh, what is this? But yet I just looked at a part here but Sam says, Ninny hammers, noodles, my beautiful rope, there it is tied to a stump and we're at the bottom. So it's kind of cute, like these little moments where Sam realizes, oh, that rope that I just used, now I can't climb back up and get it. And then, oh, guess what? It comes down because it's a magical elf rope. How convenient, but also awesome. Like, I like that part, but I just found that I couldn't get through it as quickly because I was wanting to read the most exciting parts. So I'm less interested in the politics of the kingdom. I just want to see, how can we conquer, what do we do with this ring? Where's Gollum? What are the Ents really up to? Where's Saruman? I was more interested in just like the meat of it. But I don't worry so much about Aragorn's background, probably because I just don't know as much about it. I want to see, like, I'm excited about, let's get into Mordor. Let's see what happens, and what's Gollum really going to do? Is he going to turn against them again? What's going on? Like, there's more of that. But I also just really I do appreciate the language, and I appreciate all of this that he created. Like, I just cannot imagine myself creating a world like this. This is like a lifetime. This is like a lifetime work where you create this place, you create these characters and all these plot points, and there's a map. I go and look at the front and I think, where are they? There's just things that you have to spend a lot of time. It's not just something that, okay, we'll read it and then we'll talk about it casually, move on. It's some of the things don't make sense. And you read another book, even Harry Potter, there's a lot of characters, a lot of things happening, but everything seems to make sense. Here, you're like, well, some things are just a mystery. Like somebody, when they mentioned like I forgot about that, the ghost army. Oh yeah. And how they didn't really worry about Fangorn Forest or the Ents until there they were. Like, it's like, they don't know about their own land. It's like, oh yeah. And no one knew about hobbits. Like, how come nobody knows about these things? We kind of know what's in our, maybe we don't know. Like, we don't know everything about our own Earth or our own country. Sometimes we think we do, but I'm just like, I'm surprised that all these people, or all these, what do we call them? Like, all these little life forms are so disconnected from one another, and the elves are mysterious. There's just a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's like, it's for entertainment. I think you read it to become a better reader. You read it to be entertained. You don't necessarily read it to gain knowledge about the real world, not really, other than realizing greed can consume you and the righteous will win out, or should win out.